City Council, I would like to recognize last week's unveiling of the updated murals in Grandin Station. Councillor Caterina was there as a supporter of the project through his role on the Council's Indigenous People Strategy, along with myself and Councillor Henderson on that initiative. Unfortunately, I was unable to be there on the station platform, but I wanted to commemorate this special occasion in Council as it really is a milestone in the journey of reconciliation for our city.
I still don't know what reconciliation means. I know what it means between two people. It's making a friendship again, making amends from the past. To me, reconciliation means I don't even know.
So it's just nice to get human hands touching it. It'll give it a different feeling when it's up. It'll have your spirit in it a little bit. So if you're doing stuff that's wrong, you're ruining my show. Just kidding. That's a lot of pressure.
Epistemicide is not complete. Helping our young people make sense of the socioeconomic distress that they see around them everywhere all the time, to remind our young people that that's, the oppression that they see, we are so much more than that. There's so much underneath that iceberg.
I would say I was a good kid, and not as fortunate as others, but I was a good kid. I tried to be anyways.
I'd like to invite Justice Sinclair, Chair of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, to come up to the podium and say a few words. Thank you. Justice Sinclair.
Good morning, Your Honor, members of council, staff and volunteers, honored guests, and ladies and gentlemen. Truth and Reconciliation Commission has been created by the parties to the Indian Residential School Settlement Agreement, and it's a court-approved commission so that we are mandated by the courts to do our work across the country. We were approved to do our work and started out as commissioners in 2009, and we'll finish our projects in 2015. We are required to hold 7 national events across the country, and the event that we are holding this week here in the city of Edmonton is our 7th and final national event. Following this, the process of collecting, collating, and reviewing the documents that are in the hands of the parties will be our major task, and we'll have other activities as well dealing with the issue of reconciliation. In order for us to be able to do our work, of course, we need to understand the role that the truth-telling process will play in the conversation about reconciliation. And for us, our obligation as a commission is to document and tell the complete story of residential schools in this country and the impact those schools have had on the lives of all Canadians. The one thing that we are satisfied that we can safely say is that telling the truth of the past is a painful experience at best. And it's painful not only for those who have to tell it, those who have to listen to it as well, have to relive some of that context in their own lives. I want to indicate that what was behind the establishment of residential schools in this country was not a massive display of racism on the grassroots of the citizenry of the country, but it was because of the leadership that was shown by those who were in positions of power in our country in the past. And in order for us to move forward into a path of reconciliation, in order for us to establish a relationship of mutual respect, we will require leadership as well, be able to talk to the citizenry of this country, to show the way that we must move forward, and to begin those conversations at those levels. So I'd like to commend all of you on council here and all of your staff for showing that leadership, because we know that showing leadership at the local level, at the community level, is one of the most important gestures of reconciliation, because it has the greatest impact. And neighborhood by neighborhood, citizen by citizen, village by village, and city by city is how reconciliation is going to be achieved eventually, so that Aboriginal people will be able to finally say that they have that relationship that was always intended to be put in place.
I think the eye-opener was in Hall B, I think it was, where everybody was telling their stories. There was something about that room where you feel everybody's energy because of the stories they were telling. They were so deep, and their emotions came out, and you just feel the energy within the hall. I didn't get much time, I didn't get to experience it like I wanted to, because I wanted to sit there and listen to the stories and watch the people and everything like that. But because of my duties as a cameraman for this documentary, I was all over the place. Didn't really have much time to listen to. But my eye-opening experience was in Hall B, where everybody was it Hall B? In Hall B, where everybody was telling the stories, because there's that energy in that room where it just like butter or like water, it just surrounds you. And just hearing some of the stories that people were saying on the stage there was touched my heart a lot. I felt like crying a couple times there, but a tear didn't drop. I really did feel like crying. Seeing my friends cry and everybody. It was an experience to remember, and don't forget where you come from. Don't forget what happened in the past.
The very first time I talked about the residential school, I said it was just like I had these skeleton keys, and I went through a door in my mind, and I would go to each door and I would open them, and this one was fear, and this one was low self-esteem, and this one was sexual abuse, and the list goes on and on and on.
I remember the loneliness, the crying, and being witness to all the abuse around me.
I feel like I've been dropped from the sky. Nobody around me, strangers around me. They don't know us, I don't know them. I don't know how to socialize. I don't even know how to love.
I went through sexual abuse. I went through physical abuse, mental, spiritual. And I'll tell you, the one thing that we suffer the most is the mental and spiritual abuse that we carry the rest of our lives.
My mother and father had 13 children, and every single one of us had gone to residential school. I longed for the smell of spruce boughs and of the smoke, wood smoke. I longed for the taste of the dried meat and the dried fish. I was hungry for all of that time for my own food. And there was such a longing in my heart, such a loneliness for my people.
This individual, this perpetrator of mine, this is what the individual first heard when he was talking to me. I said, I'm sorry. I said, I'm sorry because For the last 50 years, I've hated you and I've wanted to kill you. That came from me. But that wasn't me speaking. That was that 7, 8, 9-year-old boy getting out whatever was still bothering him after 60, 65 years.
My youngest brother, his name Michael Antoine, is 12 years old. And my mom and I were together and we got a call. He's in the hospital. He was in residential school. I wasn't by that. I walked into the hospital and he was black and blue. I was never so shocked in all of my life. And then a few days later, we got a call. We're still in the city, my mother and I, and we got a call at night and they said he passed. It's about us, it's about my brother, it's about the children that never came back.
Yesterday I was asked, in your work so far, and it's almost 5 years now we've been going across the country with our court-ordered mandate as a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, what was a surprise for you? And the surprise for me was the depth of abuse that went on across this country in residential schools. I knew it was there, the physical abuse, the spiritual abuse, psychological abuse, and worst of all, the sexual abuse. But I didn't realize the depth of it in this country. Having had a chance to visit 300 Aboriginal communities where I heard horrific stories about residential school experience, almost 7,000 stories. And time and time again, people told us about the mistreatment as children they received. So this to me was the surprise. But when we sat down as a commission, first day we met and we asked each other, why are you doing this? It was a serious question because I didn't have a good answer. I didn't want to do it, to tell you the truth. But I'm really in reflection now being so thankful as a blessing that I was able to do it. We said to each other, we must hold this work up as a trust, a sacred trust for the children that were taken and for the parents that were left behind. So we kind of used that as a theme or a reminder, daily reminder for our work, that it was for the child taken, because this was about children being taken away. I remember faintly being dropped off at the school at 6 years of age in January. But there's a lot that I don't remember after that. I do remember the awful experiences. At a meeting at the Yukon, a girl pointed out to us, we see your theme there. This is for the child taken and a parent left behind. And she said, what about the children that came after? She said, I'm one of the children that came after. My parents went to residential school. So I want to thank you for exploring reconciliation in this discussion, and also the intergenerational trauma, which is what the young girl was asking about. What about those that came after? And it's a very serious and important question, because many times we heard, our parents never told us anything about this experience. Some even said, "You're asking us to tell you something that we've been trying to forget for 40, 50 years. So for us to open up and tell you now is very painful." We didn't hear anything from our parents. Another young woman came in front of us and she said, "You know, I don't know anything about residential school life. My mother never said anything about it. But she just died in prison. And I had to go pick up her, gather her clothing and her belongings in prison. And among the collection, she said, I found a diary. And I started reading the diary. And here it was a daily account from prison about residential school that she was able to learn from the diary. And she was so thankful, she said, and she read passages to us from the diary.
Okay. Hello, I'm Corey Wayne, and we're here at Robbie's house. I'm on his kitchen chair in his living room while he is texting his cousin. And over there, pan out, you could see Paige LaRondelle, and you can see Bob Marley's shirt. I'll play. Yeah. And Sharon. Paige and Sharon. Okay. So we're here at Robbie's kitchen. We just finished the interview for the TRC event that we documented. So watch us on CBC. If we are on CBC, I don't know. Watch us on APTN, the Aboriginal People's Television Network, right here on Aboriginal People Television Network.
My part was a gaffer, and it was just helping out the director, our director, Paige, and the cameraman, Corey, and I just, basically a gaffer is just carrying around bags, but me, it was different. My role was different because I got to even take the role of director, or else take the role of the cameraman too. I didn't know about this stuff, before I came and helped out with this project. I was totally, I was really ignorant.
I've never done anything like this. I didn't expect it to be the way it was.
Do you feel like you need to add anything that's important?
But the only thing that I would add to this is that when we think about reconciliation, and this goes to your question at the beginning, as I mentioned before, usually reconciliation happens in contexts in societies where there has a lot of been past wrongdoings, and TRCs are created with the purpose of dealing with those past wrongdoings. And in many instances where these similar commissions have been created, I'm thinking of Chile or Argentina or even South Africa, all of these countries were supposedly moving forward to something, to a different place in society in terms of what was going on, right? So something that I sometimes ask myself is that whether or not in a country that might remain colonial, that's possible. Whether or not that's possible to actually reconcile without changing, without making broader changes. So that's what I would say.
Awesome.
Just to think about.
Think about it. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
Seeing this being done by students, I'm really, it makes me feel happy to see that these young kids are learning as they do, as they talk to other people, what the word reconciliation means. Makes me so glad to see that these students have a lot of experience in knowing about residential school. And doing it for as or reconciliation, explaining reconciliation.
The second shoot we had was at Aaron Paquette's studio when he was making the mural for Grand Station. So we got in there and he actually let us help him with the mural. We did the pictographs in the mural. So that was a good honor for us to do. Really good, because now we're part of Edmonton. Now we're in Grand Station. We're immortalized within that mural in Grand Station.
The Grandin murals as they appear today are the outcome of 2 years of dialogue and rich community consultation. They were created by artists Aaron Paquette and Sylvie Nadeau, and Sylvie's here today. If you could stand and be recognized. You can see some photographs of their work in the slides being shown right now. And Sylvie is the artist of the original mural. And La Francophonie Jeunesse de l'Alberta commissioned Grandin Station's original mural in 1989 to honor Bishop Vital Grandin for his contributions to the surrounding community. The city had heard concerns from citizens who felt that the mural evoked the troubling history of residential schools. Councillor Sohi received and responded to some of these concerns, and in 2011, La Francophonie Jeunesse and the City of Edmonton convened the Grandin Working Circle with the support of the Edmonton Arts Council and other community agencies. The circle decided to re-envision the original work and commission a new mural. Ms. Nadeau has added 2 panels to her original work showing an Aboriginal boy and girl in traditional dress. Aaron Paquette is the Cree Métis artist who painted the new murals depicting Aboriginal history and sacred symbols for the east wall of the Grandin Station. He was introduced at the unveiling, but unfortunately not able to be here today. Both artists are talented people who worked closely together for 2 years. The resulting murals were designed to speak to each other and reflect the journey of reconciliation.
When I was a young man, I loved art, and as a child, I didn't know the stories. Right? Because no one talked about it in my family. Yeah. No one did. No one talked about it. And so I just admired the artwork. And it's as I got older and all of this information started getting out and we all started learning it together and being horrified by it, right? That the mural changed from being like, what a beautiful sort of pastoral and historical image to something that was, people I know, they had trouble now going down there, and it wasn't because the art wasn't good, and it wasn't the spirit of the art, it was the memories and the things that it spoke about to them, right? Mm-hmm. It was the, people bringing their own pain to it, and it awakened it. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And so, for me, it's hard for me not to love the mural, because it's my first impressions of it was being amazed, but I also, it's interesting because it's been part of my journey as an adult, I guess, as growing up, to see that while the world looks beautiful, so we learn different things about it and our perspective changes. And then our feeling about what to do changes, right? Yeah. Does that make sense?
First event that we shot was at City Hall, the media release for the Truth and Reconciliation event that happened at City Hall. With Don Iverson was there, Willie Littlechild was there. First time I met this guy, and I could see in his eyes that he heard a lot of stories that took a lot on him. And he's a strong guy.
In terms of recollecting back the stories, we see the nature of the schools, and of course you know that it was about institutionalization and intolerance, the denial of language. We heard students talk about having pins stuck on their tongue or in their tongue for being bold enough to speak their language, being punished to try and exercise your own cultural manifestation. So it was a denial of culture, it was a denial of family. I come from a large family. I was raised by my grandparents, but I did have 7 sisters and 4 brothers. I went to school with all of them, but I don't know them. I know their names, but I don't know them as a brother and a sister because of the separation, because we weren't allowed to associate with each other. The physical punishment that went on. I was asked recently about whether it was true or not that I had severe beatings with a hockey stick. And yes, I did. But I won't go there because this is not about me. The impact on the individual is what I wanted to tell you about from the voices that we heard from, about the loss of identity. You see, the first day you went to school, your name was taken away from you and it was replaced with a number. So I have 3 names. Mahikan mo, Deo. That's my Cree name. Willie Littlechild is my English name. But my residential school name was EIRS 65. So you heard 65, pick that up, you dummy. 65, come here. Why are you stupid, 65?
I always wondered about this when I was a young kid too. Because when I was young, I was very observant and I seen people on the streets, homeless people. And there was always people of the same race. They're same as me. They're native. And I always wondered why there were so many natives on the street like that.
Is there anything you want to say about the PRC?
Oh, I don't know about too much right now because it's just beginning, So, well, after the first couple of weeks, I'll get a better understanding of it, But as it seems to be today, the whatever it is they're talking about right now is pretty fucked up.
If you don't mind me asking, have you been to residential schools?
Yes, I have.
Intergenerational, the passing on to the next generation. Intergenerational survival, the passing on of how to survive the trauma imposed upon our people. This is the indigenous knowledge of love and compassion. We must be reminded of the power of love and compassion. It has helped us to survive, and for some of us, maybe even thrive. We are still here. We were not intended to even be here. We have in fact survived the largest act of genocide the world has ever known. That's 97% depletion of original populations. Praying in our languages and using our medicines today, even though they were outlawed and punishable for 100 years. An international recognition that a crime against humanity has occurred here. A crime has been committed, an apology made, payouts have been distributed in an alleged attempt to reconcile for the crimes. But we ask, who is the criminal? Has a criminal been named? Has the criminal been judged? Intergenerational trauma, Yes, we know it. It's in our blood. The memories of trauma run through our veins. Many of our people refer this to as blood memory or soul wound. The Indian residential schools, the 60s scoop, this indeed is a systematic dispossession of the human right to transfer love and happiness. The low fluency of our indigenous languages is not our fault. It's not a loss. It has been a systemic dispossession. We live it, our parents lived it, their parents, and we pray and hope our children don't. There can't be any reconciliation until there is truth. Truth is, 1 in 5 mainstream Canadians receive university degrees. 1 in 5. While only 1 in about 33 to perhaps even upwards to 40 Aboriginal people receive university degrees. 9 in 10 Aboriginal men have been incarcerated at least one time in their life. Aboriginal people are more likely to go to prison than university. More likely to be homeless, the most likely to be homeless in our own homeland. The least likely to be homeowners in our own mother country. Aboriginal women are more impoverished than any other group, and by 5 to 7 times are more likely to die violent deaths. Truth, these are the truths. Truth is, we are so very much more than the oppression in the statistics. Alberta experienced the heaviest population of residential school students. We also experience today the highest unemployment rates of Aboriginal people than any other province. The TRC process has engaged with survivor stories, and for many, it has been healing for them and their families. And for others, it has had a devastating impact.
Somebody in the room today talked about a Holocaust, and what happened to Aboriginal people in Canada meets the definition of any Holocaust I have ever heard of or written about, but it is a silent Holocaust that is never discussed, and only now are we learning more and more about it.
This part of Canadian history has largely been forgotten, repressed, shoved under the covers, hidden. It's just starting to come out now. And I remember when the apology was read in 2008, I called my mother from Ottawa because I was at the reading. And I said, "So Mom, what do you think?" And she said, "Well, now they'll believe us and that we weren't making up stories."
You will never feel fulfilled unless you have those questions answered. So we really have to know the truth about the past, and that's something that's been hidden for a long time. As well, we have our society that we live among, that we have relationships with. We have to know what their history is as well. So in the city of Edmonton, where we're going to have this national event, it's important for the environment that we live in, the society that we live in, to be educated and informed and understand the truth about our past. So once they do, then we can reconcile. Then we can build healthy relationships, and then with those healthy relationships, we can move forward, and we can deal with the effects of residential school and all the other traumas that we've dealt with.
Whenever you're ready.
Okay.
You ready?
Go now?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. Did you just want to say your name and spell it?
Sure. It's Ian Mosby. IANMOSBY.
Awesome. All right. So first question: what made you want to research what happened medically at the residential schools?
Well, it was actually by accident that I discovered these experiments. I was doing research on the history of food and nutrition in Canada during the 1930s and 1940s, and I was interested in residential schools as part of that. But I started to come across documents that suggested that something else was going on that didn't seem right, that seemed sort of tweaked my interest as a historian of nutrition. And so I kept digging. Every time I went back to the archives, I ordered more documents, and eventually this story started to emerge of these nutrition experiments being conducted in 6 residential schools.
Many of our families have stories about starvation, going hungry. We also have stories in our families about strange needles and pills and charts with check marks. And it's the work of Dr. Ian Mosby that validated and legitimized a lot of the stories in our families.
The question then is, how do we understand the historical legacy of these experiments? For survivors, these revelations simply confirm that what they had long believed about their experiences. As residential school survivor Leonard Poulos told the Toronto Star, he was alarmed by the revelations that he'd been part of a nutrition experiment, but not surprised. Quote, "They never treated us as human beings. Even to this day, I'm 67 and I'm still haunted by it." The sentiment was echoed over and over again by other survivors of these experiments from around the country who, like Bernard Knockwood, Marie Doyle, and Benson Newcomus, made it clear to reporters that their experience of residential school is one of constant hunger in the face of inadequate and often inedible food. And these accounts, which are common among survivors across the country, carry an important message that has never really been acknowledged in an official sense. The nutrition experiments were only possible because malnutrition was already systemic in residential schools across the country. And poor feeding and malnutrition did not end when the experiments ended, but seem to have continued well into the 1960s and 1970s. The question then becomes not just what were the health impacts of these nutrition experiments themselves, but what are the health and psychological impacts of multiple generations of children being malnourished during their formative years? Another unanswered question remains as well. Were these the only experiments? Many survivors I've spoken to told me that the revelations this past summer only confirmed their suspicions that they'd been the subject of medical experiments in their local communities, in residential schools, in TB sanatoria, and in Indian hospitals. Hopefully, as my research has suggested, the assumptions that made these nutrition experiments possible, both within the scientific community and the federal government, remained in place well after these scientific experiments ended. Perhaps it's therefore time that the government took the concerns of survivors seriously and began to release records, not just of what happened in residential schools, but also in other federally operated institutions like Indian hospitals and TB sanatoria. I think most Canadians think that there was some abuse done by sort of bad apple priests. And this article shows that the abuse is systemic. Children were malnourished across the country for generations. The effect on communities, on the health of individuals and on communities is difficult to fathom. And so Canadians need to understand that, and I don't think they do.
Something that was not in our mandate. We were asked about missing children. What happened to those children that never came home? So we took it upon ourselves as commissioners to do some research on that. You know, when I was a little boy and I was 3 miles away from home, I could not go home at Christmas time. I could not go home sometimes during the summer. 3 miles, I thought, wow, that's such a distance. And then I heard children talk about being put on a float plane from a canoe, put on a plane, never been on a plane before, and they're flown to Ottawa. In Ottawa, they're put on a train to come to Edmonton. When they got to Edmonton, they were flown north, 2,500 miles from home. Can you imagine trying to run away from school, run away from the abuse for that distance? So some children froze to death trying to do that. Some children drowned trying to cross a river to go home because they were either lonesome or homesick or they were being abused so badly in school.
Walk on, little Johnny, walk on through the snow, heading down the railway line, trying to make it home, and he's made it 40 miles, 600 left to go. It's a long, old, lonesome journey, shuffling through the snow.
So we said, let's try and find these children. So we've now been able to identify 4,134 children by name. We know where they're buried, so we can offer that information to the families so they can now put closure to that. You see, in our way, like you have ways, We sing a traveling song at the service, the funeral, for the spirit to return. These families didn't have that chance. They didn't have a chance to have a feast to honor the departed spirit after the. So now, at least they'll be able to do that honoring for their relatives. A mother said to me, you know, the last thing I remember, I was hanging on to my little girl so hard, the RCMP came and pulled one arm away and the other one arm away, and they took my child. That's the last time I saw my baby girl. Mr. Commissioner, you go find my girl. The story after story after story like this, when the child is taken away from the parent and they don't come home or don't come back. In Red Deer along the river, there was a school. And in one grave, because of ceremony with the elders and prayer, they were able to open the grave and they found 4 little skeletons, one on top of the other, from the residential school. We don't know who they are. But next week, as we have this national event coming up, you will hear from a witness who will give us 800 more names of lost children being found. So this is an ongoing story, and we will uncover more and more. So while I say it was not a part of our mandate, I'm glad we did it because it's so important. You see, in Alberta, for over 116 years, residential schools were operated here. Alberta had the highest number of residential schools. 25 have been recognized. There's been more, actually, residential schools, but 25 have been recognized. So we want to honor those survivors from those schools next week.
The question really becomes then, what do we do about this? How do we address it? Can we fix it? What can't we fix? What do we need to simply come to terms with? The reconciliation is something that dominates every relationship. Whenever there's a relationship that people are having, they always have to come to terms with those things that cause them differences or that arise between them. You have to resolve those differences in a healthy way, even if one of the ways of resolving them is not to deal with each other anymore, to separate and go your different ways. But in the case of Canada, Aboriginal people are not going anywhere. The Canadian government is not likely going to go anywhere. The churches are not likely going to go anywhere. So there has to be some kind of a future relationship between them. So the question is, what's the nature of that relationship going to be? And what do the churches and the government need to do to change their behavior, which has caused the problems that we are now looking into as a commission? It's a complicated question. It engages everybody, not just Aboriginal people, because on the other side of the equation, while Aboriginal people were being told they were inferior, being told that they were savage, being told that they were irrelevant, non-Aboriginal people were being told the opposite, and that is that they came from superior nations, they came from better people, they had a better way of life. And that has created a wide separation between the two cultures, and we need to overcome that.
What do you see the solution?
There's no immediate solution to reconciling. I don't see us reconciling anytime soon, not within the first 5 years. I'd like to see that, but I don't see reconciliation happening for a little while. And it's hard to tell what it would look like. It's about acknowledgement and respect. Know that they went through this, or know that they went through this, and respect it, and don't take from them. I don't even know. I always say don't take more than you can give back. Be happy with what you have, you know. The more you own, the more that owns you, I guess.
But reconciliation, get back on topic. I don't know what reconciliation is. I don't know what it would look like.
Embark upon the report writing process, which we have been actually doing to this point, but now it becomes more serious because we have a timeline in mind that we're going to try to hold to. We also know, of course, that there are certain conversations that we have to have now about reconciliation with specific groups. We want to bring in elders who have teachings about reconciliation and ask them to talk to us. We want to bring in representatives from the women's community to talk to us about what women think the TRC should say about reconciliation. We know that there are youth out there who want us to know what they are saying about reconciliation. We want people from the LGBT community, the gays, lesbians community to come forward and talk to us about what we need to say about reconciliation that will help them. We want the academics to commit themselves to do work on understanding this history and portraying it in a way that leads to reconciliation. We want our political leaders to talk to us in a comfortable way as well. Ultimately, we want the voice of our report to be strong. We want it to be inclusive, and we want it to be in a direction that people understand. And so as a commission, we still have work to do, but that work will not include the feelings beyond the memories of events such as this. And for that, I have a great deal of sadness. I want to tell you that I love you all. I wish we could do this forever. I wish I could say we'll do it again tomorrow, but we can't. We are going to do what we have been called upon to do and what the survivors have asked us to do, and that is to now move it forward. And so to all of you, with love, with affection, I say thank you very much for the honor of doing this work. And we will now take up the challenge of putting all of these things that we have heard into a form that all of Canada will have to respond to in a positive way. And we will carry forward your message. And you will show your support for this by, among other things, participating in that walk that's going to occur here this evening, by showing all of the public that you mean business when it comes to reconciliation. Well, thank you very much.
Project gathered Indigenous youth, and they had no knowledge about the Indian residential schools. They had no ideas or conceptualizations around reconciliation and what those notions mean. And so the agenda was for these kids to take the camera equipment, to go have conversations with people, documenting their own journey around what is reconciliation, what were the Indian residential schools, and how does it impact themselves? How does this legacy connect with young people today?
My name is Austin Laptek. I'm 17 years young, and my family is from Saddle Lake. I was born in St. Paul, and I was raised in Edmonton since I was 2 years old.
My name is Brandon Alexis. I am 22 years old, and I'm from Alexis Nakota Sioux Nation.
My name is Nathan Alexis. I am editing the Truth and Reconciliation documentary.
Hello, my name is Dakota Flamond. I am 19 years old. I'm Ojibwe and Cree.
Hi, my name is Sharon Lynn Summer. I am an 18-year-old youth.
My name is Paige Wanda. I'm from East Prairie Métis Settlement, but I've been living in Edmonton, like, I guess most of my life.
My name is Corey Wayne Nicotine. I grew up in all over the place. I grew up in Sad Lake, Saskatoon. I was born in Regina, Saskatchewan. Grew up in Saskatoon, Sad Lake, Edmonton, all over the place. I moved around a lot when I was younger.
This is not the end, this is the beginning. This is not the end, this is the beginning. This is not the end, this is the beginning. This is not the end, this is the beginning. This is not the end.